People often say that they have a lot of experience in an area, and that might be the case through perhaps gathering or going through a lot of certificates, having degrees, having doctorate degrees, which is PhD in a field, and then going to demonstrate what they've learnt by teaching others. And yes, that is being an expert in some respect. I would further consolidate that to say, to be an expert, I believe it's not what you do to a lot of people on different platforms that makes you an expert, but it's what you have been through yourself, and not just been through, but have come through. That's what makes you an expert. Why? Because you have the ingredients to teach someone a method that could work for them, or even if it doesn't specifically relate to them in a way, you have some level of foundation to say it happened to me so you can come through too. And that's why stories are powerful. So the reason I say this is because this area, when I say I'm your self-realization mindset expert, it's not grandiose, it's not being arrogant, it's because I have had a lot of personal experience that I have come through. So, daddy trauma? Now this, I call myself an expert, but not just because of the trauma, but because of my triumph. Hi everyone, I am Toyin Okanuga. I am your girl, I'm your hoshtaral girl, I'm your self-realization mindset expert. Yes, self-realizing you. I don't heal you. No. Apologies if that came through in another video. I ain't a healer. Jesus is my healer. I ain't one. I just help you realize what you have in you. So yes, thank you again for joining me in these very important videos. Today, I will be talking about how mindfulness healed me from my daddy trauma. Now, in psychology, they actually call it daddy issues, but I didn't like that term because I believe what I have come through are not issues, like in project management where you say risk and issues and escalate your issues to a senior manager. No, these are not issues. Daddy issues are not issues that you can escalate somewhere or someone can help you outside. They may be able to guide you a little bit, but this, my dear, is internal, that you need to do the work yourself. And that's why I say it's trauma. Why? Because it's life-changing circumstances when you have daddy trauma. Yes. So I have coined mine differently because daddy issue, it says it more for maybe like towards girls and their fathers, or it goes through something, maybe someone that you've been with your daddy who has done something wrong to you. But for me, it's both. It's like either being through a very lovely experience with a dad or very negative experience with a dad. You could still have daddy trauma. And that's why I call myself an expert and have coined this to be daddy trauma, not daddy issues. So let's go. I have my slides here again where I can go, otherwise this could go on forever in my free flow if I don't stay focused. So before we dive into the daddy issues, or what I call daddy trauma, I want to talk a little bit about the brain. I am all for the brain. I think you should be too, because you guess what? Everything that we do in life is because of the functioning and structural components of our brain that eventually filters to our mind, and then our feelings, and then our actions. Yes, so everyone should love the brain and know how it works and how it's been affected. That's why I love the brain. So the limbic system, I actually have some structures here. So the limbic system. So psychologists now recognize that the limbic system serves a lot more functions than previously believed. Yes, I'm sure you know that that static brain is no longer static because of neuroplasticity. I'm not going to go into that with you, but that's one of an area that they realized. So these structures are known to be involved in the processing, that's the limbic system, and regulating of our emotions. Emotions are key here. The formation of storage of memories, sexual arousal, and learning. So that is the limbic system. And yes, so when it comes to the limbic system, we have what is called the amygdala, which is like an almond shaped here, and the hippocampus. This hippocampus, a Greek word, it's hippocampus. It's termed hippocampus because it's from a Greek word that means seahorse, because it's shaped in that form. So this is the hippocampus, very closely linked to the amygdala, and I'll just say why. So this amygdala, which is like an almond shape, this is half of it. The other bit is on the other side of the brain there. But this is like an almond shaped structure, and it's located right next to this hippocampus. The main function of the amygdala is in emotional responses, including our feelings of happiness, fear, anger, and anxiety. So daddy trauma. Yes, you know, daddy, especially daughter and daddy, meant to be lovey-dovey, walking you down the aisle. You know, there's so many emotions, the feelings of daddy's girl. Everything is linked to that interpersonal relationship you will have with your dad. Hopefully yours are all beautiful. Some of mine were. So this area is also key for formation of new memories. So new memories that you have, the amygdala is also responsible for it. So the amygdala interacts with the hippocampus, because you know they're sort of like linked together anyway, by attaching emotional contents to memories, and that is how they function together. So it has a role in how memorable memories can be, and how strong they can become too. So when it comes to the hippocampus, which is like the seahorse here, they, as I said, seahorse shaped, they're structures mainly associated as being memory centers of our brain. So that's why the memory, the hippocampus and the amygdala, they serve key, critical functions within our brain. Not to negate other areas, but I'm talking mainly about emotions because of daddy trauma. So the daddy trauma that I want to go through now, I've explained the functions of our brain in this area, and if anything gets damaged within here through our memory formation or the happy moments, the emotional connection, it affects the hippocampus and the amygdala. And that's why I thought I'd talk about those first, so we can have the juice to why this does indeed happen in our lives, whether you're a woman or a man. And they mainly associate daddy issues, which I coined daddy trauma, to women, daughters to father, which now they have made it gender generic. So why do I call myself an expert? I call myself an expert because you could say psychologists have looked at daddy trauma, one daddy to a daughter, for instance. In my case, if they were to do a study on mine, I don't think they'll even call it daddy trauma. It will be a very huge name. Why? Because I've not only been through one daddy trauma, another daddy, another trauma, another daddy, another trauma. So I've got 3 daddies that I had in my life where I was traumatized by each one of them. So daddy 1, daddy 2, daddy 3. 3 different daddies, and there were traumatic events, and that's why I said it could be a happy that turned sour, and it could be a sour that stayed sour. That's why it doesn't necessarily mean that your daddy issues as you've grown to be an adult could just be from a bad relationship you had with your dad, because that's not my case through and through. And I'll tell you why. My foster dad, I got to know when I was 2 months old as a baby, a white British man, lived in Leicester. I was fostered by him and his family at the age of 2 months old, and it was the most till date amazing childhood experience I had in my childhood life in its entirety. Why? Because not only was I just adored by my beautiful foster dad, incidentally his surname is Kind, is the epitome of kindness, gentleness, caring. He's the only man I'll say that I've really seen cry, because his emotions, they're on his sleeve, but he's so loving. He was loving. We lost him a few years back, bless his soul. My foster dad, I was his angel. He called me Bass. Get your hush to roar to know why it's Bass and not Toyin. So my foster dad was my beautiful, amazing daddy. He'd put me on his lap, he'd throw me up, he'd roughen my hair that was afro and big in those days. And I stayed with him and his family from 2 months until I turned 8. They were the best days of my life. When I turned 8, I was drastically taken away by my biological family, my mum and dad. Now, I remember leaving him and crying my heart out. But when I left, I remember him getting on his knees. Now read it in hush to roar, because I've tried to do an audio, but I cry each time I even get there, so I stopped. I remember him saying, "We'll write letters to you, darling." Kissing me, and I said, "I'm gonna write letters to you too every day." And I did exactly that. When my biological family took me, I wrote loads of letters whilst I was still in the UK. Still in Leicester, but a different area. I got no replies. In the end, which fast forward, I remember when we got back together anyway, him saying that he sent letters and I sent, and I was told that they were kept from me because out of sight is out of mind. Out of sight is out of mind might work for a packet of crisps, but it doesn't work with someone that you love. So guys, if that's your strategy, please don't do that. It was excruciating pain when I could not have any relationship with my foster dad, because I wrote letters, they didn't give them to him, and he wrote letters, they didn't give them to me, and I just felt shattered. That as an 8-year-old, I don't know, all I felt was sadness. I can't say I thought I was neglected or removed. All I know is I was very sad. I was very sad. I used to have tinnitus, earaches, tummy aches and headaches, and I did not eat. I remember not eating and being told off at the table because I just lost my dad, my foster dad that I loved. So fast forward, so that is one level of my emotional trauma, psychological, physiological trauma, because it was all in my body that I felt the aches and pains of losing my dad, the connection we had. So that's one daddy trauma. How does this play out? We'll see. I'm 8 years old. My mummy and daddy, my real dad, my black dad, and my siblings, all 4 of us, were now taken to Nigeria. I was 8. I got to Nigeria. My lovely biological dad, my dad, he loved me because, you know, I was the first girl after 3 boys. So he took me under his wing. I'm sure he recognized I was very upset from leaving my foster family. So I'm sure he gave me that buffer, like the extra social buffer that was needed for me to heal in some respect, because I felt like his princess, and I also performed very well. I was very intelligent, so he showered me with gifts and he adored me. I was his princess. He gave me loads of piggybacks. He would feed me when he knows I'm not eating. If my mom told me off, he would pamper me, and all the things that daddies do to daughters that are their princesses, he did them all to me. I loved him, he loved me. Now, I remember at the age of 9, when I turned 9 in Nigeria, my mom said we had to go somewhere. So she took me out to this place. I remember seeing a big house, and through that house I remember a man running out to me and picking me up from the ground, and I said, looking at my mom, and my mom said, "That's your dad." I was 9, and I remember looking at my mom to say, "Dad's at home." My dad, the one that I'm his princess, is at home. What's my mom talking about? I remember the man rushing and just taking me to say, "No, come. And he took me to his room with my mom was there, and he showed me. I looked at the wall and there was a massive picture of me on his wall. I was so confused. Now remember I talked about the limbic system, the memories, the emotions that go on, functionality, the structure of the neurons, everything. These were all playing out in my mind. Remember, I've already had one trauma of leaving my white foster dad in Leicester. Remember, now I've got my second dad that I've now bonded with since I left my foster dad. I've now sort of like gained the trust again that someone's loving me, my dad is loving me. Now my mom's telling me as I'm 9 that that dad that I thought was my dad is not my dad, and now I've got a new dad. Can you understand what would be going on if there were men and women sort of like helping you with your brain neurons and trying to tie them together? And now they must be shouting, Toyin, what are you doing to your brain? I've just fixed it all up. That is what happens when we have disruption in our life. Why? Because here again, I'm feeling emotionally neglected because my dad, who said I'm his princess, is not my dad. So I remember getting home and not telling my siblings because I was scared that if I told them, they'll know that I'm different to them. I remember not saying anything. And I also remember my now stepdad, who I thought was my dad, never coming to me. I'm sure he was shattered too. But you want to know how that happened, read Hush to Raw. But I'll be telling you more in another video. I can only remember as a 9-year-old feeling very guilty and not guilty, maybe I don't know if that's the right word, which I thought at the time. All I know is I was always avoiding him. I didn't want him to see me and he didn't call me. I don't know how his feelings were, but I later found out when I was older because I needed closure. I would not want to see him. I remember him not calling me to do any chores, which I felt really abandoned because I thought, oh, so I am different, and he would call my siblings. This shattered me, and I'm sure now that I'm grown and healed, I know that he must have been very upset and he just wanted the detachment so that he could stop being used to me. But for me, I didn't look at it like that. I still needed him. I needed his love. So this is playing out in my brain, in my memory, that my memories that I had that were love. Remember I said the hippocampus and the amygdala are to do with your emotions and everything. So you can imagine there must be structural changes, right? Because things are happening that are different to how I started my life. So that's why it's important. Emotional neglect, everything is what I felt. So when I turned 12, even though the intensity of my tummy aches continued, the tinnitus, my earache, the headaches, everything got worse when I got introduced to my real dad at 9. I remember waking up at night every time to wake my mom to say, am I going back to Leicester? I would cry, she'd say no. And then I'll say, am I going to go and live with that man and his family? She would say, just go back and don't talk about that now. She did, and they did what they thought was right at the time. Well, before I went into secondary school, before I turned 12, just around 11, I was told I needed to go and live with my real dad. I had been going to visit him like on a weekly basis or, weekends, but I was always like, not my comfort zone. It wasn't familiar to me. But before I went into secondary school, I was told that I had to move with his family, leaving my stepdad, which I felt guilty about, and I cannot remember him coming to me or hugging me ever after I'd been introduced to my real dad. I felt neglected. So I was going to go to a boarding school. My now real biological dad, I hope you're not confused because this is confusing. My biological dad said I had to stay with him because I'm going to go to a boarding school. He was quite well-to-do, and he was going to take me to a boarding school. And because then everything was showing in my body, but no one knew that it was a trauma. I was now being very slow. They used to call me slow coach. They used to say I'm very sluggish. I was still doing a little bit okay in my schoolwork, but I was becoming very sluggish. I later researched to know that that was part of my trauma that I was going through. But everyone would say, come on. But then the reason my dad said I should go to military school was because I remember my mom telling me later that I was very sluggish and my dad thought military school would put me up straight. I was petrified. Remember, I was in Leicester, my Ring a Roses, nice little school where I had different way of living. Now I'm going to be sent to a military school. Daddy trauma. I was now taken just to know the school with my dad by air. We travelled by air to a place called Jos in Nigeria. It's another part of Nigeria. Yes, so he took me just before we resumed to a beautiful hotel it was. And I remember that night, it was at night time, the door opened. Or no, I remember opening the door, but then jumping in bed. And that's the only bit I remember in that hotel at night. And then all I remember after that was a very heavy weight on my little body at 12 years old. I remember looking up in my bed and seeing the weight of a figure that was meant to be nurturing me. My daddy, my new dad that I got introduced to at the age of 9, was sexually abusing me in the hotel. My body was being violated. I could not speak. I froze. I'm sorry if that's a trigger, but this is what daddy trauma is. It's not an issue. What's going on? I don't know. And I won't go into more details. All I can tell you is that when I got home, it continued because we had adjacent rooms and there was a middle door that we both shared. So he would take the key, put it around his side. When I'm back from boarding school, he'd come in at night to my room and abuse me. When I was really upset, when he'd go out and I'd see him come back, maybe I could smell his breath. It was alcohol. I don't know. When he was shouting, if he was shouting, I'd run to his room, get the key and put it my side. I remember him shouting to say, go and put the key back. I knew that night I'd be abused. Well, to cut that story short, I was sexually abused by my real dad that I got introduced to at the age of 9. From 12 until I turned 15. Daddy trauma to the highest extreme of human race crimes today is being sexually abused. And being sexually abused by your father, your daddy, is one of the heights of crime today. So that is daddy trauma. And as I grew up, I knew I had daddy trauma after my research and when I started to heal, because I was afraid of being vulnerable. When I got married, I would always ask my husband what he was thinking about. I would have anxious attachments to always know how he is feeling about me. I didn't know me. Now there's another one that says you could either use sex to feel loved or not even want it at all. Now I'm not going to go into my sex life. I can say I have 2 children. So you make up your own decision about what you feel my sex life might have been. But I won't discuss that. You have trust issues. I did have a lot, not just towards my husband, but and not that he gave me any reasons to not trust him, but I just had them because these are daddy trauma from my experience. My amygdala was always at a heightened state. Remember, it had always experienced bad things, so why won't something bad happen again? That's why you need to heal with mindfulness. So you pick unhealthy partners. I'm not going to go into that, but I can tell you I'm divorced. Right. So those are the things you need to look out for. Are you always anxious? Do you always cry? I had depressive symptoms. They were not diagnosed. But how can you heal from them? So for mindfulness is the key area. I didn't know it was working. I remember going to an area, it was called Body Balance, which is a combination between Pilates, Tai Chi and yoga. And I remember doing them and I hated it. I used to feel horrible. And I told my friends we were going, I said, I don't really want to go. And they said, come on. And I stopped, but I knew, I felt something was going to happen in a positive way for me. And that's when I continued. And then I started to research and say, wow, my amygdala. And before I go into mindfulness, a few things that happened that I did then, because I know you would want to know, were I had to know things with my other fathers before they passed. And I did. So park that, back to mindfulness. I had to breathe. And I realized that actually meditation calms down your sympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system, that's the limbic system. There's nothing sympathetic about it, by the way. It's just the arousal of your amygdala. It's always up there like mine was, because remember, traumatic in a very short space of time would make me always at a heightened level. So when I started to meditate, all it is breathing. So when you breathe and you calm down your amygdala, you allow your prefrontal cortex to take charge of your logical decision making. That's what mindfulness does. People think it's woohoo and no. It calms the state of your being. And that's why I know that mindfulness has helped me, because I was so angry, irritable with everyone in my life. It helps with the pain and depression, stress and anxiety. I do it every day. Sometimes I can do it twice because depending on your trauma, no one can tell you how you should heal. You will know within yourself how you need to heal because no one's story is the same as yours. Every human being is unique, and going to the therapist once a week or even once a month, whatever, it won't help you. You have to do things on your own as well. So the neural connections, repeatedly doing that activity, is what eventually that keeps calming you down. Why? Because life doesn't stop. Life doesn't care whether you've had traumatic experiences. It doesn't mean that you won't have another one. In fact, if you've had traumatic experiences and you haven't healed, that there's a tendency that you will have more traumatic experiences. Why? Because you've not even learned how to heal from the past and how to deal with your present or the future. So that's why mindfulness helps you to be more aware. It's self-awareness, being present, being here, being now, here, now. And then I was always in my past. I couldn't get past my past. And I was always in the future, scared for the future. I was never here. Mindfulness makes you stay present, stay here. Deal with this moment that we've only got this moment. We're only promised this moment. And mindfulness helps you recognize the awareness and lets you know that you are no longer in a frightened experience. Be present, be here, be now. And that's what the mindfulness does. And that's what it still does with me. And that's how I say mindfulness has healed me from my daddy trauma. You see, I was divorced. That you may see in my other video of how I caused my divorce. So, my dear brothers and sisters, like this video if you feel it's helping you along the way. Remember to take deep breaths and remember how it's going to help your brain, and that is mindfulness meditation. Please press the like button, subscribe to Hush to Raw. Let me continue to educate you on why I know I'm an expert in these areas. And yeah, let's have a dialogue, comment, like the video, subscribe, and let's continue with this journey and teach each other how we can benefit from our unique stories. I love you guys. And remember, your inner child, it has a voice. Don't suppress it. Calm the amygdala down with mindfulness and then let it roar. I love you guys.